Welcome to the Wild Type Podcast. I'm Lyssa Lizards.
I'm Neptune the Chameleon.
And we're your reptile girlies. We are talking about bugs today.
Yes.
Literal bugs.
Every reptile keeper's dream.
Not yours. That's for sure.
My worst nightmare.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a big bug fan either. I find like the really exotic ones really interesting, but these are not the fun kind.
These are not the fun bugs. These are not the
No.
bugs you want to have. It is a conscious decision to bring hundreds, if not thousands of roaches into your home. It is a different story when they are pests that you did not ask for.
That is so accurate. And I think it was actually one of our most recent episodes that I said, you know, Logan will bring me one and be like, is this yours? And I'm like, no. But if it's a pest that I don't want in my house,
You're like, honey,
we're
flush it.
getting it out of the house as soon as possible.
Honey, I flushed the kids. That's what popped into my head.
That's
That
really
movie
funny.
was-
I forgot about that movie.
Wait, no. Flushed the kids? Shrunk
Shrunk
the kids.
the kids. Shrunk. It was shrunk.
I was like, I said it, and I was like,
Bugs are already miniature. So-
no need to shrink them anymore. Yeah.
No, but okay. So we've both had experience with pests
Yes.
because I think it's really important to simply note that if you're going to have bioactive or even naturalistic enclosures,
Just plants. Live plants
live
and dirt.
plants, like it is a given. You are going to come across pests.
And I feel like it's obvious, but also people don't think about it.
People don't
because
think
then
about it.
everyone, myself included, is always shocked when
Right.
there's like little bugs bopping around
Right.
in your enclosures and you're like, where did you come from?
Yeah.
And the worst is it can be months, if not
Yes.
years, that you've put any new plants in there and then all of a sudden
Mm-hmm.
these bugs pop up. And you would think if you put a new plant in there, that would be the culprit. Not the case.
Not always the case. It's
No.
super interesting. And I find it really interesting too, because we've talked about this. I've been, you know, keeping reptiles since I was in like high school with my leopard gecko. And I did not have pests at all for many, many years because I was not keeping live plants, because I was not keeping naturalistic, not keeping bioactive. So I do find it interesting because if you're somebody that truly, truly, truly wants to avoid pests, you can. But is it the best for
Pros
your
and
animal?
cons.
Like so many pros and cons.
cons.
Like
Yeah,
you got to
we're-
decide that for yourself.
We're pushing for naturalistic. We're pushing for bioactive as a hobby in general. Both of us keep both naturalistic and bioactive enclosures. And yeah, there are pros and cons. Like, you love them and you hate them. So I
It's tough.
think the pests are worth it.
I do
think they're
too.
manageable with the exception of one.
Yeah.
Mealybugs.
Mealybugs equal doom.
Mealybugs
Doom and gloom.
mean you gotta rip out all the plants in your enclosure. So we both, as of very recently, now both have experience with mealybugs. Yours was a couple years ago, mine was a couple weeks ago, and I would not wish it on anyone.
I literally wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Mealybugs are literal doom. They are death to all of your plants. I recently found one in one of my very nice house plants that is not in a reptile enclosure, and I about lost my damn mind because I started getting flashbacks to my experience of mealybugs ruining, decimating my enclosures.
Lived vicariously
Yes.
through your mealybug experience up until
Yes.
very recently, and I sent you a picture, and I was like, is this what I think it
It's
is?
like, I am so sorry. I am so sorry.
Okay, so what even is a mealybug? Because there's some of you listening, and they're like, what are you even
Never
talking about?
even experienced it. Yeah, lucky. You're lucky. We're jealous of you. But it's these tiny, teeny little,
Very small.
white, fluffy little things.
The little legs.
Yes, tiny little legs, tiny little antenna. Sometimes you'll even see the antenna before you see the actual bug because they're just kind of long and they look like little strings almost. And so the most common place where you'll find them, so if you're going to be a psycho like me and inspect every plant really intensely, if you flip over the leaf on the underside, they're usually on the underside of the plants or in like the nooks and crannies.
Yes, along like the stem or the vein of the plant. They were all over my monsteras in particular because they've got those big leaves. And so they were, to your point, underneath. But eventually they'll make their way on top of the leaf. And that's typically by the time you notice them.
That's
and
usually
then
too
you
late.
flip over the leaf and you're like, uh-oh.
Then there's
they're
like
all over.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Mealybugs
Yeah.
are like highly infectious, contagious. They spread like wildfire.
So fast.
So they'll start on one plant and then they'll move on to the next plant and the next plant and the next plant. And then they'll move from one enclosure to the other enclosure and the other enclosure. They can be in separate parts of the room and they will make their way into another enclosure. I had these wall hanging plant fixtures. They were all over those plants. And then they were in 2 of my 4 enclosures and they were opposite. So I had one that was okay, one that had them, one that was okay, and one that had them. And for whatever reason, they didn't get those other 2
Dude,
enclosures.
I don't know how you got that lucky. I genuinely don't.
It's what skipped over one of the enclosures.
Mine followed me to a new apartment. I
Is
moved.
bad.
I moved and it followed me. My situation started in Barney's pothos in his enclosures at my old house. And when I moved houses, I just tossed the plant, cleaned off all of his branches, and was like, we're going to be done with it. Unfortunately, Kermit's enclosure had been directly underneath Barney's.
Oh, so they moved to hers.
And so they moved into hers and they started eating away at all of her pothos and destroyed all of her pothos.
Okay, I'll be honest. I don't fully understand why mealybugs are bad. I know they're infectious and I know I needed to get rid of them. And so I just like did what I had to do. But like if I were to have kept them in the enclosure, like do you know what the...
Literally all it is just they will kill every plant in that enclosure.
Okay.
So it's not so much that it's going to... Oh, that's a great point. Let's be so clear. Mealybugs are not going to harm your reptile.
They just would have eventually, because I caught them very early, because
Yes.
otherwise they would have been, and they weren't even in Pluto's enclosure yet. They had taken out my 4 plants that were on my walls and then 2 of my enclosures. So you're saying if left to their own devices, they would have just eventually eaten away at the plants. Okay.
Every single plant would have eventually withered away and died. A very sad death. They would have all turned yellow and then eventually brown and then eventually just died out.
Okay. So what I did was I saw them and I texted you immediately because I was like 99.9% sure.
Please
but
don't tell me that's...
get confirmation. I'm like, is this? And because I had gone vicariously through your whole thing, I scrapped every single one of those plants. And this is a 2 foot by 4 foot. So I probably had close to 15 plants per enclosure. And these suckers are like zip tied. They're like vines are all like intertwined. Like I've had these plants in here for years. I had philodendrons and monsteras that I had for close to 5 years in these enclosures that were like full stalks, like whatever the word is, like fully filling out my enclosure. And it was the most heartbreaking thing because they were all over the monsteras.
It truly is heartbreaking.
And I had to cut them with scissors because like there's no way I'm able to lift that out. I also was trying to minimize how much I was moving the plants so then the bugs wouldn't, because I've heard they can fly.
Yes.
And I didn't want them to transfer to the other enclosures. So I literally felt like an evacuation type of person. I had a trash bag, I had gloves on, and I'm cutting away at these plants and I'm carefully pulling them and then sticking them straight into the trash bag. So they're not even airborne. Because I had 2 enclosures that were fine.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I gotta try and save these 2.
You handled it very, very well.
And I put them immediately outside, like out the back door.
Yep.
Because I have houseplants too. And so again, I didn't want them to get in the houseplants. It ended up working out. I did have to keep their enclosures pretty bare in the meantime, which is like really heartbreaking.
Also not fun.
No, because you want them to feel safe and secure. And so they had all their sticks and stuff, and I did scrub all those down, left them in the enclosures because those are like attached and would have been a real pain to take out. But it ended up working out. I tossed all those plants.
Dude.
I got a brand new plant shipment. I waited, I would say, a good 2 weeks at least, if not close to 3 weeks, before I put in the new plants to like make sure that they hadn't moved to another enclosure. And they're like,
that's very smart.
And it's probably been a good 2 weeks since I put in the new plants, and everything seems to be...
That's great.
But I'm paranoid.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I don't want to be the one to make you paranoid, but I also thought I was good for a good 6 months.
And like we were saying, like, how did they get in there? I had not added any new plants to the enclosures in months.
And so that's something that I would say specifically with mealybugs and like pretty much any potential pest you can have, any new plant that you bring in. And like you said, it might not even be a new plant, but just literally any plant that you're bringing in to an environment for your animals, like you pretty much need to completely get rid of all the soil, completely clean off the roots.
Yep.
Because like to your point of like, where did they come from? You can literally buy a plant at the store, at Lowe's, Home Depot, whatever. And you can literally, they will have eggs already deep buried in that soil. And it'll be like attached to like the root ball. It'll be like really deep in there. And so you really got to look for those things. And it's such a pain.
It's so time consuming, especially when you're working with like 15, 20 plants at a time.
Yep.
To dump that dirt, to wash all those plants down to the roots, to repot them. It is a pain. And then you have to somehow attach them and put them in the enclosure.
Yeah.
Like,
no, it's a nightmare. I hate having to like prep all my plants. Yeah.
Hate. Double hate.
Exactly. It's So
your mealybug story though, because
Yeah.
yours
Oh my
is,
God.
I feel like mine, I caught it early enough.
You did.
And I just like went to the extreme. I did not try and wipe them down. I did not try and save the plants.
Right.
I just said, take the loss, take the hit, and just like,
Yep.
Yours was different though.
So mine started, I would say, God, when did I move? I moved, I think, in 2022. And so this happened before that. So I think it happened in like early 2022 when I was at my old house. And that was where I had like the separate reptile room. And so this was before my studio apartment. And in that house, I remember finding the mealybugs on Barney's pothos, which was very upsetting because he had those pothos for years.
That's
like
what I'm saying. You
2 or 3
invested
years
with these plants.
Well, and then they just grow and they just fill out the whole enclosure. And it was like the perfect pothos situation because they were everywhere and he was climbing all of these
Which
pothos.
is what you want.
It was literally,
Yeah.
and it had taken years for them to get to that point. So I was like really heartbroken because when this happens, you basically have to start the whole enclosure over, which is, as we know, a huge process.
Yes.
And so when that happened, I knew that I was moving soon. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to trash all of these, put some fake plants in there for a little bit. And then when I move, like I'll make sure that, everything is good.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of planned it according to my move. I tossed all the old plants. I put some fake ones in there for a little while. I cleaned off all of the wood. That is like huge, huge tip. Don't forget because there will be at least a couple on there and they'll breed and start all over again.
Yep.
So cleaned off all of his branches, everything, and moved to the new house. And I thought we were good. It was like totally, good. Before I put him back in the enclosure, I like made sure all the branches were like dry. I sprayed them with vinegar. I like did all the things. And so I really thought it was okay. And then maybe like 2 or 3 months after living in this place, I spotted some mealybugs on my monstera, which was not in a reptile enclosure. And I was like, great. So it started with the monstera. And so I just started wiping that down with alcohol all the time. And I thought it was fine and it started to go away. And then I noticed that they were in Kermit, my tiger salamander's enclosure.
Yeah.
And that was super frustrating because they were deep in there and and that was also an enclosure that I had a bunch of pothos in. And so that was a lot. And so I basically ripped out all of those pothos and just started that one over.
But there's still all that soil in there, and Kermit's enclosure is so moist.
So moist.
That I have to imagine, even if you took out those plants, they were still in. And Kermit is not a species that you can like.
Yes, but the good thing is if you rip out all of the greenery, they have nothing to eat in there. So they'll go elsewhere and they'll eventually abandon that enclosure if there's no real plants in there. And so I just ripped out all the plants. I obviously couldn't afford to dry out that enclosure because she has to stay very, very, moist. And so with all of that, I basically took out all the greenery and was like, all right, well, that's pretty much all I can do for that enclosure. And then I kind of went about my time and I was like, okay, I'll just keep an eye on everything again and whatever. And then next step, couple months again, which is why I'm like, it might take months for you to notice them again because
You're making me very nervous.
I know, I'm really sorry, but I was just like, this is just what I'm just explaining my experience.
I know, and I appreciate it, but now I'm going, oh no.
That's literally why you were like, it's been 2 weeks. I was like, oh. Because I thought I was
You're
fine.
like, how cute.
This was like a 4-step process over the course of over a year.
And you think it's the same batch of Mealybugs? Like, you don't think it
sure.
was a new...
For sure.
Okay. Oh, great.
Yeah. And so
I won't get emotionally attached to the plants I have, is what you're saying.
Please don't.
Okay.
So basically I was fine for another couple months or so.
Yeah.
And then I noticed them on my monstera again. And then in that same week, I noticed them in my crested gecko and gargoyle gecko enclosures.
They move quick.
Very quick. And I will say, and you said that they hadn't gotten into Pluto's enclosure. So Pluto, for anybody who doesn't know, her crested gecko is in a glass enclosure, right? So I think it does take them a little bit more time to find their way into each individual glass enclosure, because they have to obviously go in through the top or through the cracks.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit harder for them to get into those.
This actually kind of makes sense, because the way I have mine structured, my enclosure set up, is I have screen, hybrid, screen. And they got into a screen enclosure, skipped over the hybrid, and got into that next screen enclosure.
Yes.
So that actually makes sense. How they didn't get into the other screen enclosure, I think just because I scrapped it and
jumped on it.
Yeah, and they didn't have time to get over. But who knows? Maybe they're sitting in there and I'm just waiting for them to pop back up.
Because mine started in Barney's enclosure, which was a screen enclosure for my panther chameleon. And then the Kermit enclosure was directly beneath Barney's.
With a screen top.
Yep. And so that's how it definitely easily got into those two. But it took... at that point, it was almost 8 months before they got into the gecko enclosures.
Yeah.
So it took a long time. But basically, my last resort, which is one of my really funny little stories about reptile keeping, I let a bunch of ladybugs loose in my apartment.
Oh, man.
And so when I did that, I ordered these ladybugs, and I basically just set some of them loose. And ladybugs are natural predators of mealybugs, so they're supposed to eat the mealybugs.
Can you imagine a ladybug, a predator of anything?
No, not at all. And so,
but ladybugs are supposed to be super toxic for reptiles.
Yes, so you do have to be careful. It depends on the species.
At least for chameleons. I can only speak for chameleons.
Right. It's definitely toxic to chameleons, so you have to be very, very careful there. But I will say most reptiles aren't really going to go for ladybugs, like geckos and stuff like that. I wasn't super worried about them doing that.
Yeah.
And so that was basically it. It didn't work, but I moved again. And so when I moved again, I just scrapped everything.
Got it.
So, and then now we're basically still where I was a year ago, where I'm redoing a bunch of my enclosures. And that pretty much just started my whole process. So basically what I'm saying is I am still not over my mealybug infestation.
Oh, no. You're making me very nervous.
They're finally all gone, but I basically had to get rid of most of my bioactive progress for most of my enclosures.
I know. And how do you prevent mealybugs? There's nothing you can do to prevent it other than not have live plants.
If any of you know any actual tips to prevent it,
we're our plant keepers, because we are reptile keepers who happen to have plants.
Yes.
We are not plant keepers who are well versed in
exactly
plant pests.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you have tips, please tell us, because we need them just as much as you guys do.
Yeah.
So please fill us in. But that was my mealybug experience. It was super rough.
Do not recommend.
No. Brief intermission. My adorable sweet puppy was previously in the room. So if you heard tiny little,
he wanted to participate.
He did. He was just giving
I've got things to say too, Mom.
His tiny little whines. So apologies. He is now hanging out with Logan downstairs. He's gone. He was being so good.
I know. Well, I feel like we're good on the mealybugs.
Yeah, I think so too.
I know one that I wanted to talk about were millipedes.
Okay.
Not to be confused with centipedes.
Yes.
Because those are not good, but...
I have never experienced these.
Yeah, so I found them one day in Luna's enclosure.
Okay.
And I'm at the point, a chameleon keeper thing is, you'll put large river rocks over the plants if your chameleon eats the dirt. None of mine do, so I don't. So I've got these big old potted plants in there.
Right.
And in there were these long, skinny, multiple little, creepy crawlers. And... Ugh. As we said in the beginning, I am not a bug person, period, and certainly not bugs I did not put in there.
Nope.
And so I was like, what are these? And so I literally took a picture of it and then put it on my Instagram story and was like, SOS, like, what are these? And people were like, infestation, that's not, and they were coming at me, and I was like, then someone was like, actually, it's a millipede, they're for plants, they are attracted to moist dirt.
Makes sense.
And they eat organic matter. And so they're not harmful in any way. Like, the only way I'd really be able to get rid of them is if I dried out all of my plants, which I can't really do with the chameleon enclosure with how much we're like misting and everything like that. And so I look at them as like part of the cleanup crew, really, because like they're going to eat the poop, the shed, any organic material. And so I'm like, okay, they're creepy. They're also nocturnal. And so I'll go in there in the middle of the night and they'll be climbing the screen.
Ew.
And so I just, on the outside of the enclosure, just flick them. Like, you know, I don't, and they just go blink, and they just like pop off and go back.
That's kind of fun.
And I'm just like blink, and I'm like, get off the screen.
That's awesome.
I've only found like a couple of them on the floor because they're like the screen enclosures are not like there's cracks in there, you know, so like they can definitely get in and out. But for the most part, they stay contained to the plants. They really come out at night.
Ew.
But yeah, I didn't put them in there.
I think that's like a good slight little segue into just talking about like beneficial pests, which unfortunately, fortunately, however you want to look at it, you know, it is just a part of bioactive keeping or keeping with live plants.
Yep.
I think that's just something that, you know, if you don't know, if you haven't done bioactive yet, if you're looking into it, that is just something to be like aware of because it's going to happen. And it's funny, I've talked to, you know, different people at like the Bio Dude or, you know, different reptile, you know, businesses, companies that, you know, sell bioactive products. And they're like, nope, those will just show up. Just expect that. Like it will show up.
Yeah.
And another example of that I have experienced is wood mites.
Oh, and yeah, I haven't dealt with those.
That scared the actual hell out of me when I first got them because I am always hearing about snake and lizard mites.
Yes.
And so I was terrified.
Which are a big no-no.
Big, scary no-no.
Yeah.
And so I freaked out when I saw the wood mites because I completely, and there's also soil mites, which are also just something that will just naturally happen and occur in bioactive enclosures.
I don't even know what those look like. I may have them and not even know it.
They're just tiny little creepy. I mean, they are like microscopic tiny. So they're super hard. You have to be like staring at that soil. But sometimes you can have like an not necessarily, I wouldn't call it an infestation, but like an overpopulation of them.
Okay.
And so they are, for the most part, beneficial. They're just part of the ecosystem that you are creating in that enclosure or part of, you know, that soil that plant came in or whatever. And so some of it's just completely natural, but they can overproduce and overpopulate sometimes. And it just depends on your situation and what you got going on. But in bioactive enclosures, usually that will like balance itself out over time and it'll just kind of fluctuate. But those are the ones that I just don't want anybody to panic and think that you have snake or lizard mites.
Yep.
The snake or lizard mites, if you haven't ever looked it up, just look it up, do a little Google.
Yeah, self-awareness. Yeah.
The snake and lizard mites are a totally different situation. Look totally different colors, bigger, all those things. So just make sure you know what you're looking at because some of the beneficial ones are those like, you know, wood and soil mites, and they can be beneficial, but they can also overpopulate. So you just got to kind of be aware of it. You know the drill. Another month means another set of great deals from Pangea Reptile.
In honor of the Olympics, they're offering some golden prices for crested geckos, including one of our personal favorites, Dalmatians. We talk about how live plants can be tricky for pests, so if you're in the market for fake plants, this is the time.
And for those of you with a green thumb, tons of isopod species will be on sale looking for a new home in a bioactive enclosure. There are lots of other deals, including Labor Day, over at PangeaReptile.com.
Yeah, one I get asked about all the time is gnats.
Yes.
How do you get rid of gnats? How do you get rid of gnats? How do you get rid of gnats? In like my 2 cents, I'm over it. I just accept that I have, and they come in like waves. I've only had a really big gnat infestation once, and I looked up a whole bunch of things you could do, but they were also like, they only live so long.
Right.
And if you just wait them out, they will eventually die off.
Right.
Granted, it took over a month, maybe 2 months if I remember correctly for that to happen, but eventually they did just like
die off.
Yeah. And then they were gone.
That's honestly my exact experience. Is it comes in waves, and I know it'll happen like more towards like the summertime and things like that. And like, so sometimes I'll have more than usual. Sometimes I'll have less. It just kind of depends. There are definitely things you can do. You know, one of my go-to things was to get like, you know, a plastic cup, put a little bit of red wine, a little bit of Dawn dish soap, and a little bit of honey, and mix it all up in there.
I've heard similar, but with like vinegar or apple cider vinegar. I've heard.
So you can. There's so many mixtures online.
Recipes.
There's so many little like homemade recipes you can do.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, the Dawn dish soap was always pretty regular in there, and the honey is for like the sweetness, and same with like the red wine. But you put them in a cup, and you get some of that like plastic wrap around the top, and just poke holes in it, and they'll fly in there, but then they have a hard time getting out.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
And so that, if you're just looking to kill off as many as you can, doing that and having that in your reptile room or in your bedroom or wherever your reptiles are, like that does help significantly. It doesn't get rid of them. It's not going to completely eradicate.
No, because again, if you have plants and if you have dirt, like
it's just going to happen sometimes.
Yeah, and I've heard they're attracted to like the moist soil.
Very much so.
And so I've heard like, oh, well, like let your plants dry out. And again, when we're trying to maintain certain humidity levels, like that's really difficult for us to do.
We can't just let enclosures dry out like that.
No.
Yeah.
And so I've just kind of accepted my fate. I have heard of some people just like, and please do your research on this. I think they put like vinegar directly in the soil.
Oh.
I've heard of that happening. Someone asked me if they could use sticky fly traps in their enclosure, and I said
No.
absolutely not.
Big no.
I don't care if your chameleon, your snake, whatever's never gone to that part of the enclosure. Do not put anything potentially sticky or adhesive in your enclosure, because in the remote off chance that your reptile touches that, that's a vet trip, and we do not need to even like. I will take Gnats over a vet visit any day of the week. So like, I would not advise that. And avoid any sort of like harsh pesticides or chemicals. Anything that would normally be safe in your home, like especially anything that's airborne, we just don't mess with reptiles.
Yeah. And there are some things you can try. You know, one example is diatomaceous earth, which I don't know if I'm even saying that correctly. I think
it sounded right.
I think I'm right. But it's basically something that you can sprinkle into the soil, and it is like microscopically sharp to where it will like basically like razor blade through all the bugs in the soil.
That sounds dramatic.
It is dramatic, but it is something that, somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure isn't potentially harmful to your reptiles, unless you're dealing with like amphibians who are burying themselves in the dirt. That is like very different situation. But reptiles that don't live in the soil, you can put it in there and it'll kill off literally any living thing in your soil. But obviously keep in mind, if you're keeping bioactive,
you'll kill off the good guys too.
You're going to kill off all the good guys. So there are things that you can do, but literally everything has a pro or a con.
Yeah.
So
I'm just like, the gnats are annoying. They're not harmful to my reptiles. They're too small for them to try and eat. They're not going to like hurt them in any way, shape, or form. So like, yes, they're annoying, but like I've kind of accepted it at this point.
I have too, and I personally have never had it bad enough where it was just like ruining my life. You know what I mean? So it just kind of depends. Everybody's situation's different, but there are things you could do, but you know, sometimes they may work in certain ways and not in others. So you just got to kind of be aware of the situation.
Absolutely.
But whatever pest infestations that you guys have dealt with, please let us know, because there are definitely more.
Oh, we are going to get so
covered.
many good tips off this episode.
I'm honestly kind of excited.
Yeah.
Because like we say all the time, like we are learning just as much as you guys are. So like
for sure,
we want to know all of your tips,
and
tricks.
we're plant enjoyers, enthusiasts, but we are not plant people. We are not plant keepers that know the ins and outs of all the different species and things to do and whatever else. Like you have your little houseplant collection, I have my little houseplant collection, but we are not like in it like some people are. And so if you are one of those people and you happen to keep reptiles and listen to this podcast, please let us know.
Seriously.
Thanks.
And I just want to know y'all's experiences. What horror stories do you guys have? Because I know you have some.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that kind of like wraps us up with all
good.
The little creepy crawlies that we love to hate.
I know. Stupid millipedes.
So we have kind of a fun, weird, different, not related to reptiles at all. So if you're only here for that, feel free to hop on out.
Yeah, this is where we hit the girly topics.
Not just the girly stuff, but just like fun to talk about. So
It's fun to talk about because we're girls.
yes, that's accurate. That's accurate. It's also just, I feel like every girl thinks about this no matter what, but we're talking about engagement rings.
Cute. Well, who sings it? Beyonce. If you like it, should put a ring on it.
Yeah.
That's Beyonce,
No, that's
right?
for sure Beyonce.
Okay. Rihanna very briefly popped into my head for like 2 seconds.
No.
And I was like, that's not right. Is it though? So I just...
Minor side note, I am a Riri fan over a Beyonce fan all day, even though she doesn't give us any new music.
Yeah. She did give us a Super Bowl though.
She did give us a really good Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So
Top tier.
Yes, but mine put a ring on it. Mine put a ring on it. We're still working on you.
No.
But it's still fun to talk about because
Yes.
every girl thinks about this.
For sure.
Long before you have the boyfriend, soon to be husband, soon to be fiance.
Yep.
Long before you have that, every girl, at least that I know, is dreaming about, their ring, what that experience looks like. But it's a weird process, right?
Yeah.
It's a really interesting
different
one.
for everybody.
Yes.
And how you think it's going to go could be completely different. And we can have these ideas and then we meet our person and you're like, actually,
I think totally differently now than I did even a year ago. Like,
yeah.
It's very interesting. And it's funny because I remember being in college, being like, 21, 22, and a couple of my friends were starting to, go down the process of it. And I remember so many girls were telling me that they went ring shopping with their guy. And I, back then, little 21-year-old me was shocked by this. Completely shocked by this.
It's so common nowadays.
It is.
It's like kind of the stages of your relationship of like, hey, have you talked about getting married?
Right.
What does that look like? Okay, you've talked about it. You both are kind of like decided you're in it. It's like, oh, the next question you ask is, have you gone ring shopping?
Right.
It's just like an assumed
It's a
thing
part of
that
the
you
process
like
now.
that you do together.
I just, for the record, I did go and look at rings with Logan. We did do that process, but years prior, that was like not something I had ever considered that I would do with a guy. And, and everybody's different because I know there are some people who deeply plan it and like know everything. So I feel like there's almost like a spectrum of...
Yeah, and there has to be someone listening and they're like, absolutely not. They could have proposed with a ring pop. I don't care.
Right.
Didn't, whatever, right? And like, I hope you get some entertainment out of this because this is a whole process. But
well, and just to say that, like, not everybody needs this whole process. But if you are someone that wants this, like, and wants to go through the shopping of it all, but I mean, to each their own. There's also we'll have other episodes where we talk about other alternative ring options because that's a really fun topic too.
Sure. Yeah, I think at this point I would like to go ring shopping. I mean, ideally with my significant other, but like I, for my own learning, would like to know what I would like. But I feel like I fall in the camp of like a hybrid, and you're kind of in this camp too, where like I'd like to go in the process and be like, hey, this is kind of what I like, and this is what I don't like. And for myself, I know like trying on the rings and like seeing the different styles and everything. Like you think you want one thing, but you maybe want another. But then like letting him go and like run with it from there, I think is like really special. But did you do any like homework beforehand? Like did you have a Pinterest board? Like you kind of knew what you wanted? Like,
which is funny because I have had that Pinterest board since probably like 2012 maybe. I've had that Pinterest board for a very long time, and I definitely had like an evolution of like what I thought I would have wanted. And it's funny because my ring doesn't look anything like what I thought I would have wanted.
Sure.
So, and I was very much in the hybrid where we went and looked at rings and we kind of did a little bit of prep work of like, I knew what my like non-negotiables were, which for me was yellow gold. That's my favorite, type of metal. I knew that I wanted that. I wanted a little bit more of like solitaire or, having a couple of, stones flanking it. So I knew like the basics of what I wanted, but I didn't know really anything other than that. I had a few shapes in mind that I thought that I would like, but I was actually pleasantly surprised, which is why I do think it is helpful and beneficial to go and try things on and see because everybody's fingers are different. You're looking at all these photos or your friends or whatever, and you're looking at all of these things and you think you like it, but when it's on your own actual finger, like in person, it's a very different
I feel
thing.
like same is true with wedding dress shopping,
Yes.
right? Like you think you have an idea, you know your body type, right? And you're like, I think this is the style I want, but then like you actually try them on and you're like, oh, maybe yes, maybe no.
It'll totally surprise you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting, but I feel like in terms of like the ways you can go about it, I feel like there are people who want to know everything and want to literally know the exact ring that they're getting.
That's my coworker.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so she just started like 2 weeks ago. So she's like a brand new coworker, and she knows on the day she's getting engaged, she picked out her ring, she designed it, she showed me a picture. She's like, this is what it looks like. We're going on this family trip on this weekend, and he is proposing. Then 2 weeks later, we're going to Mexico to look at venues because they want a destination wedding. So they've already got it like signed, sealed, delivered, pre-planned. They're different stones. Like one is from her grandmother's ring, one is from her mom's ring. So it's like family, stones that are in there plus the other ones. And like, so she had all designed together. So she like zero surprises. She knows exactly what she's walking into.
I mean, good for her. Like, we love a girl who knows what she wants, for sure. But I just find that so interesting. Yeah. That's super fascinating.
Yeah.
And so there's so many ways you can go about it that way. You can go about it the route where you want to know nothing.
Yep. Surprise me.
There are a lot of people that are like that. And that's like, I think a little bit more old school method. But like, I think a lot of people still do that. And I mean, I
think that's fun. I would like to be surprised. I think the engagement ring is a fun way of your guy or girl, whoever, of like kind of having a moment to like express themselves, but also their understanding of you,
of your wants and what you like and what you don't like, and things like that.
And in more traditional relationships, like guys, girls, right? Girls are traditionally more involved in the wedding planning process and all of that. But from my perspective, like the engagements, the guys, like he gets to plan the proposal, he gets to pick the ring. Like this is his moment to shine. And then I'll be like, thanks, babe. All right, my turn. Right.
Take it from here. Yeah. And that's kind of how I wanted it to be, at least for Logan and I, because he is very artsy. He's very creative. He, works in a creative field. That is his jam. And so I didn't want to take any of that creative like moment away from him at all.
Totally.
And so for me, and my dad also designed my mom's ring. So that was also something I grew up thinking that my husband would do. And I got like very lucky that.
Yeah, because not all guys are like that though, right? And they don't have any interest in wanting to, because that is a big decision, and like you can literally come up with anything. So some guys prefer to at least have a clear direction of like, okay, this cut, this color, right? And then they can like, give them some bumpers to go on.
And I would say that's like kind of what Logan and I did. So we went and looked at rings, tried some on based on like what I thought. He actually gave some input where he even, there was one, I think, shape that I liked that he was like, I don't like that shape. And I was like, all right, up to you, dude.
You gotta look at it too.
All right, you're the one buying it. So it's, you gotta like it too. And that was really important to me.
Yeah.
And so we, basically by the end of the ring shopping, I pretty much told him I think I had like 3 non-negotiables, and it had to be yellow gold.
Yep.
By the time we went ring shopping, I knew which shape that I wanted. And then I was weirdly specific about, I didn't want the like infinity band where like it was all of the like pave, like, gemstones like all the way down the sides or anything like that. I didn't want that. I wanted like a pretty, solitaire band. I wanted to see the yellow gold that I like so much.
Sure.
And so those were like my 3 like rules. And I was like, from there, like run with it. Do whatever you want. Like I'm down. I love your style. You know me. I'll like it. And I don't care from there. And so he went from there. And after we went ring shopping, I knew nothing. It was like, that was where I stepped out of it. And I was like, this is all on you, dude. And so
let's do some timeline.
Yeah.
Who brought up going ring shopping?
Honestly, I think he did. I think he definitely did. I would not. I'm very.
Did you kind of like freak out though?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Because like I said, that's like kind of a progression, right?
That's
of
a
like,
moment.
Hey, honey, let's go ring shopping.
Yeah.
Like.
Oh yeah. It was definitely a moment. And I may be very ballsy and outspoken and no filter and whatever. I'm definitely all of those things. However, I'm also a little bit traditional when it comes to like
very much
the relationship side of things.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, You think I'm going to be the first one to bring that up? Absolutely not. That is on you. You bring that up. And so I'm pretty sure he brought it up. We were definitely at a place where like we had talked about marriage.
See, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you have to like start there, you know? And so like, and obviously, like I said, he brought up all of that. I did not bring any of that up. And so we had talked about, we were at this point where like we had just had so many like serious conversations where we were like, I know you're my person. Like, I know that I'm going to marry you. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I know it's going to happen. So we like had kind of come to that like settling point where we, you know, knew for sure that it was going to happen in the next like year or so.
Yeah.
And from there, I think he brought it up. He was like, hey, like we should go look at rings. And I still kind of had that same mentality I did when I was like 21, where I was like, well, I already know what my like non-negotiables are. I already, you know, you can do whatever you want. Like, I don't want to go shopping. So at first I was a little bit like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
And then I like talked to a few of my friends, you know, who had gone through the process and were married, and they kind of had the same advice of like, you know, you think you know what you want, but until you actually put it on your finger, like you don't know for sure.
Yeah.
And so I took that advice, and I'm really glad I did, honestly. I thought that was super helpful, trying it on and doing all that. But he definitely is the one who brought it up timeline-wise. And
so
I would say...
Oh, go ahead.
I just think from the point of talking about marriage for the first time, it was within like 4 to 6 months of that he brought up the ring shopping.
Okay.
And then from when he brought up the ring shopping, it happened like within that month, I think.
Okay, but then you go ring shopping, and then how long was that until proposal?
So I think that was in like the spring or early summer, maybe like May or June, I think is when we went ring shopping. And then we had a family trip that summer. That was the very first family trip that I was ever bringing a boyfriend on, like a big trip like that. And so he actually, before that trip, I guess, had asked my dad. I obviously had no idea. So I didn't know that was going on, but he had like, you know, and I know that's a little traditional, a little bit old school. My dad is my best friend, so I'm not property to give away, but I would like my dad to approve of who I'm marrying. And so that was something that he did without my knowledge. So timeline wise, I think it was May or June, like early summer, late spring, we went ring shopping. Sometime in July, he like asked my dad, you know, for my hand in marriage.
Ooh, yeah.
All that. And then he proposed in October.
Okay.
So it was pretty, you know, within, I would say, like a 6 to 7 month like time span of like, we had started talking about marriage like that winter, that Christmas time frame, which was about like a little over a year and a half into knowing each other, about almost 2 years of knowing each other.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of our timeline, basically.
Yeah.
So it's, you know,
Love that.
And everybody's timeline's different too. I think that's super important.
And one thing we haven't touched on are like same-sex couples,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
like,
for sure. Yeah.
Like, how does that, like, obviously I don't have a ring to show for it. You were in a very, guy-girl relationship, right? But like, when you have same-sex couples, right? Like,
I mean, I would assume in that situation, it's very, very much like communication is key. Like, you know,
my favorite are the videos where they propose to each other at the same time.
I love them so much.
Where one pulls out the ring, and then pulls like the Uno reverse card,
and they're like,
and they pull out a ring, and it's just like the cutest because they're both on one knee, and I just like melts my heart.
I love those videos, and it's so freaking cute because you know, to some extent they've probably like talked about it,
of course, and
they've probably like each had their like, you know, own way of wanting to do it or whatever, and it's almost like extra fun if they kind of almost like ruin each other's moment by having their own special moment. It's like the sweetest thing ever. So no matter what type of relationship we're in, I do think it's really, really crucial to talk about it, because something we also haven't talked about yet in this situation is there are situations where somebody will get proposed to and they don't like the ring. And it's not that it's like, I don't want people to think it's like a superficial thing.
No. It's not, it's not about the ring. Like, you can propose with a ring pop, a paper ring, whatever, right?
As long as you like what is on your finger, I think that's super important. And I've actually read some like Reddit stories and different things of like people being like, guys, I love my husband, or I love my fiance. Like, he's amazing. His proposal was amazing. But how do I tell him that I don't like the ring? And I would like to make some changes to it.
But I feel like that's a testament to your relationship, right? Because like, if you don't have that open line of communication or are able to give constructive feedback, but I get it's such a touchy thing. It's such a touchy thing because they're probably so excited about it. But I think this is true of any gift giving. When your friend gives you a gift, when your significant other gives you a gift, obviously an engagement ring is its own league compared to,
it's a very important gift.
You know, I get that. But hopefully you and your now fiance have that type of relationship where you can be honest and and not be taken in any type of way. But that's a tricky one.
That's a tricky one. But I think that's really important why you tell him your likes and dislikes up front.
Yeah.
Because then you can avoid it, hopefully. You know, and some of it's unavoidable because some people do really spontaneous stuff. And that's a whole other, thing. So it just it truly depends on like what each person wants, what type of relationship you're in, how you guys want to go about it, what are your expectations.
Yeah.
Like for me, a really big expectation was like, you got to talk to my dad and make sure my dad likes you. Like that's really important, and so you got to figure out and talk to your partner about what you want, what you like.
Communication.
Yeah. Just what are your expectations? Because trust me, once you start wedding planning, if you don't communicate, that's going to be a problem.
Or your, I don't know, entire marriage. Yeah.
It just keeps getting increasingly more important.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad you had a chance to kind of like share your experiences because everyone's is a little different. Give me some time, few years, 10 years, and I'll be there too. Don't you?
Yeah.
Don't you? Right? One of these days.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. No prospects yet. But one of these days.
We'll get there. We'll get there. I can't wait for the day that you're like officially dating somebody that you're actually really excited about. Because let's be for real. She is dating on occasion.
Just not successfully.
They're not important enough to introduce you
guys. They're not
pod
worthy. No, unfortunately.
Fortunately not.
Yeah.
But I just can't wait for the day that you have somebody that like means enough for us to talk about it. That's going to be really fun for me.
Yeah, to be like pod official, like podcast official. That's going to be like a whole nother.
Yeah. You guys know when we bring one to you, he's going to be fully vetted.
Yes. Don't embarrass me. Yeah. We're like, okay, just kidding, guys. Remember when I said, no prospects yet, but I do think I think it's common to think about it and it's exciting to think about. And I always love hearing other people's stories and I love seeing other people's rings and how excited they are to like talk about them and everything. I think it's fantastic, but you could propose with a ring pop.
Yeah,
as long as it's cherry flavored, I'm good.
Truly. Yeah. I don't even care the flavor. As long as it was Logan, I'm good. So
adorable. Well, let us know. We would love to hear from you guys. Your engagement stories. Did you go ring shopping? Were you surprised?
Did you care at all? Did you get proposed to with a ring pop? Because there are people on the opposite ends of the spectrum here. So we want to hear all your stuff.
Yes. We
love it.
Love. I love.
I know, me too.
Yeah.
It just makes me happy. But
well, this was such a fun podcast. We're talking about bugs. We're talking about rings.
Yeah, totally. And all the things. Yeah, all the things. So we hope that you guys enjoyed it. But, do all the usual things. Give us a subscribe. Give us a follow on all of our social platforms if you would like to. I'm Lyssa's Lizards on everything.
Neptune and Chameleon on everything. You can follow the podcast at the Wild Type Podcast. Thank you guys so much for watching, tuning in wherever you're listening to your podcast, and we will catch you guys in the next one.
See you, girlies.